Welcome to 20-Minute Tabletop, a podcast sharing the love of all things tabletop gaming in bite-sized pieces. I'm your host, John Wicke, here today with my co-host, Stevie.
This week, we are going to indulge our inner villain and see who is truly the baddest of them all with Disney's Villainous.
The tagline for this game is, "The worst takes all." As we turn to the back of the box, careful, don't spill it. In this epic contest of sinister power, take on the role of a Disney villain and strive to achieve your own devious objective. Discover your character's unique abilities and winning strategy while dealing twists of fate to thwart your opponent's schemes. Find out who will triumph over the forces of good and win it all.
The original game, which came out in 2018, featured Captain Hook, Maleficent, Jafar, Ursula, Prince John, and the Queen of Hearts as the playable villains.
So let's start with our first impressions.
I enjoy anything Disney villain, and this was the first game at the time that focused solely on these characters and their traits.
I enjoyed the twist of playing the villain to win and going after their goals. It definitely made it feel like something different when this first came out.
So let's talk about setup.
So this is fairly easy to set up. There's a lot of photos with labels in the directions help. Once everyone has chosen their villain, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to set up. So everyone picks their villain, they get their board, a fate deck full of heroes and things to thwart the villain, their villain deck full of allies, items, and effects to help the villain accomplish their goal, and their playbook, which gives specific information about your decks, your goals, and sometimes even tips on how to accomplish your goal most efficiently. Each villain has a different goal, so don't just pay attention to yours, pay attention to other goals so you can slow down your opponents too. We'll go into detail in a moment, but the rules take a few rounds to catch on. However, once you do so, it moves quickly since everyone has a 3-step turn. I think it's a good place to jump into the mechanics of the game, since that kind of leads right into there.
Sure, power tokens are the currency of this game, and they are required for you to play cards or enact special effects. Along with the actions in each realm on your villain's board, this is how you work to accomplish your goal. On your turn, you move your villain into one of their realms. Then you will have symbols that allow you to take actions such as play cards, gain power tokens, vanquish heroes, slow your opponents down, discard cards, and so on. Finally, once you take all the possible actions, you draw up to a hand of 4 cards and the turn moves on.
And what I like about this is every villain is different, so everybody has their board with those different realms, but the icons that appear and when they appear are different, so you really have to pay attention to that because it will affect how you play your game.
Right, and those action icons are also tied to that villain's goal as well. So, for example, on Prince John's board, a lot of the power token icons are in the upper half of the board so that when heroes are played onto his board by other players, it slows down his ability to collect 20 power tokens, which is his end goal.
So every board has spaces at the bottom of the realm and the top of the realm. The top of the realm will get covered when you play heroes against your opponent, which is one of the things you do to slow them down. Some of the things to pay attention to is when your goals or someone else's goal needs to be accomplished by, because they're all different. Some aren't considered fulfilled until the beginning of your turn, whereas others hinge on a specific event. This is important because you can use your turn to throw roadblocks in the way of the other villains. Very evil.
Playing definitely requires some planning about how you're going to accomplish your goals, but you need to think on your feet when other players play fate cards on you. For younger players, they might need some help thinking through a strategy. We're a big board game family, so our son stopped needing our help planning around 8. So your mileage may vary if younger players will be okay on their own or not.
So, we've talked about mechanics. I think some of the more mechanics will come up in how we enjoy the game. So, let's talk about our enjoyment of the game.
I love this game. The variety of villains and goals makes this game super replayable, in my opinion. It doesn't get boring ever, especially because the dynamic also changes depending on how many players there are and who you're playing against. For example, when I'm playing with one of the kids, the game's very different than when we're playing with a group of 4 or 5 people, whether it be 5 adults or a mix of kids and adults.
Exactly. I love it so much. Playing different characters changes the game and even changes your strategy because of what you need and what you want, how you're going to move around the board. Everything you're going to do changes based on your goal and everyone else's goals, and who you're playing and what characters are on the board and what ones aren't.
Right. So we talked about those fate cards, and what's interesting about those is you, as the villain, never play your own fate cards. Other people play those against you. That's a way for you to throw roadblocks up in front of the other player's goals. So, like I said, with Prince John, if you block his ability to gain power tokens, it's going to take him a lot longer to accomplish his goal. There are other villains that pulling different heroes affects their ability to complete their goal because maybe they need to have a certain hero in a certain place at a certain time, or maybe they need to defeat a certain hero in order to accomplish their goal.
Exactly. Even playing heroes against Prince John to block there are ways to even earn tokens when those heroes are played on you. And a lot of those play differently, so they're very different drastically you're playing. Today, when we were playing, I played Maleficent, and it's all about getting curses out. Once you have all four of your realms with curses, that's game over. You win. But you have to wait till the next turn. But all the curses are positives, but also negatives. One of them, you can't play an ally on that spot. That's fine. You can move allies between spaces as one of the actions. However, those spots are also covered up by heroes. So if heroes cover my ability to move allies around, eventually to defeat a hero, I might need to play an ally on that and remove the curse and then have to get new curses to place down. So they have all this trade off. So it was very, when do I want to put this curse down? Because it'll make these guys stronger and it'll make these heroes weaker. But, then it's a risk of it getting knocked out and then I'm going to have to replay it all over again. So there's a lot of strategy in how you play that, and different strategies where you play it each time can really change things up, which I love about the game. Same villain can play differently each time.
Right. And Captain Hook and Ursula have goals that are centered around defeating certain heroes at certain times to acquire certain items. And again, depending on how people play your fate deck against you, those heroes may not come up for a long time. So there's also built-in things to their villain deck to help them locate those heroes. Like, for example, Ursula needs the crown and the trident to win. So she has the trident, and when the trident comes out, it makes you go through that fate deck to pull King Triton because that's tied into that goal. Captain Hook has a similar feat in his villain deck that will force him to kind of speed through his fate deck a little quicker to find Peter Pan, because not only does he have to find Peter Pan, he needs to be able to move him across all four of his realms before he can defeat him.
In general, the strategy is roll that fate on people to try and, mess up their board and disrupt their plan. So when you do that, you draw two of their fate cards, you pick which one you want to play and discard the other. And so at times you have a choice to make. Sometimes you get something where it's like, oh, you got to play this on a hero, play this on an ally. And if they don't have any of those there, it doesn't do any good. But at times you can play those in and you got to choose. And I played an Aladdin on Jafar because he was stronger than the other one. I was like, great. Now it's a strong hero you need to defeat. Well, no. Jafar pulled a hypnotize card, hypnotized Aladdin, then Aladdin became an ally for him and used him to then defeat a different hero. And then Aladdin got off the board. It was like, well, that didn't play out as I planned. You're trying to block them up, but sometimes it helps them with that. And sometimes you have the ability to steal their items and steal the things that power up. And they have different abilities. So some of their villains have the ability to activate things and do special things. And you have effects. Sometimes you have ones that can be played at any time. Some have zero cost to play the card. So there's a lot of variability in there. And one of the spots allows you to discard cards. So you can get rid of some of the cards to draw new ones. And you always try to draw up to 4 cards. So you can always cycle some of your cards on your own by moving your villain to the spot with the discard action, so you can discard some of those cards and get new ones in.
For sure. And for villains that have a goal that requires you to cycle through your villain deck, like we said, you have those discard spots, but you have to cycle through the fate deck, that sometimes depends on who you're playing against. And if the person you're playing against knows that, they're not going to use those fate spots to trigger you. But that's where, like you said, your villain deck's also customized to your goal. So, for example, Captain Hook highly benefits from his fate deck being cycled through. So he has cards that when you play them, it says something like, pull the top 3 cards of your fate deck and do X with them. And that helps him locate the Neverland map and Peter Pan, which are both vital to him completing his goal, a lot quicker. So if you read the player's guides that are included, it gives you nice in-depth explanation of here's what you're going to find in your villain deck, here's what you're going to find in your fate deck, And sometimes, even like we said, it even gives you tips on how to accomplish those goals so that you can attack it with at least a little bit of strategy, even if it's your first time playing.
Yeah, that's where it told me Maleficent says, okay, this curse won't allow you to play an ally on it. That makes the curse go away. But you can move your allies to that spot. That doesn't count. Or if the allies are already in the spot when you put the curse down, you're great. And then she has goons that get stronger when this curse is there. So you can put the allies in the spot, then throw the curse down, make them even stronger to knock things out. So there's different ways to play. And it helps you along that path to give you some of those basic strategies to use.
Even the Queen of Hearts, which is the one I personally find the hardest to play, her goals require her to have wickets at all of her realms and to be able to take a croquet shot, which is an effect card. Even her booklet, which I flipped through earlier today, gives you some good tips explaining the wicket cards, which are actually the deck of cards from Alice in Wonderland as allies. And there's an effect that she can use to take the ally and turn it into the wicket and back and forth. So that card is allowed to go back and forth as many times as she needs. I believe her deck is also stacked with quite a few of those since she needs to have 4 wickets, 4 allies in each of her realms in order to complete her goal. Whereas Ursula's deck doesn't have a lot of allies because that's not how she defeats heroes. She defeats heroes using the contracts, right? Like the one she made Ariel sign. And those contracts are predicated on you attaching them to the hero and moving the hero to a specific location. So her deck has several contracts in it, but not a lot of allies because that's not what she needs in that time.
And then there's the cards that appear at any time and actually are based on other people's playing. So both myself playing a Maleficent and Jafar had a card that was, hey, once somebody has 3 allies out, you get to play this card and do something. And for Maleficent, it was draw 3 cards and then discard 3. I can now have 7 cards in my hand, decide which of the 4 I want to keep. And I believe you at one point were able to get some power tokens once enough power tokens were out there on somebody's, which was great when somebody's playing Prince John because they're going to go for a lot of power tokens. So they're going to reach that goal that you need to play that card and get some more yourself.
Yeah, that Ursula card was when an opponent has more than 6 power tokens. So, like you said, when Prince John is out, that's a great time. You're able to go through your Fate deck, which again will help you find King Triton faster, as well as some of the other cards that may help you in the long run.
It's amazing how they all seem to be balanced in their own way of winning. And you kind of always feels like you're getting a little bit close on what you need and trying to let the pieces fall into play, let the fates lie. But they're all different in their own way. Like I said, the strategy, the Queen of Hearts is a little more difficult, but they all have their own different ways. And some of them, and there's always that little bit of how do I get through this? How do I get what I need? And how do I cycle to what I want to get? And you only get 4 cards. So what ones do I really want to hold on for later when I need them versus discarding them out to get something else that might be more useful now?
I think that balance of the decks that you mentioned is a huge part of what makes this so replayable. But again, part of it is a bit of strategy, and that's going to change when you're playing one on one with 2 players versus when you're playing with a large group. If you have, say, all 6 seats filled, that's really going to change how you play. One of the first times we played this, our son played Prince John, and the other people playing were all adults. And no one really paid attention to what he was doing down there other than making sure he was taking his turns. And, 8 rounds into the game, he had won because we hadn't paid attention to his goal. And that's why we say not only pay attention to your own goal, pay attention to other people's, because he was younger and none of us were really playing a lot of fate cards on him or anything like that. We were all kind of all going after each other. And as a result, he won very quickly and easily.
And you talk about with 6 players. I don't know that we've ever played it with all 6 players at once. I would love to play a game like that just to see the kind of chaos double crossing that goes on there.
That's one of the things this game does well is it allows you to go head to head in that way, right? You said teaming up with another player doesn't really help you in the long run because if you're both going after 1 or 2 people, that doesn't mean that the person you're working with isn't going to win in the meantime. And that's one of the cool twists to the way this game was created. And I mean, it's wildly popular because they're still putting out expansions for it now.
Oh yeah, and I think we'll cover some of those in future episodes where you get new characters can play, and sometimes they introduce those again new mechanics for that how that villain works. And because they're all unique, they all have some of the shared things, but then they all play differently. And so it's a lot about your personal strategy of how you like to play will then draw you to certain characters.
Yeah, I played Prince John the other day, and it was just me and TJ, and he kept using the Fate deck on me. Well, I had a lot of cards in my hand that allowed me to move heroes around. So I just kept throwing the heroes in the jail because when the heroes are in the jail, it doesn't cover any of my action icons. So I can still keep doing whatever I want to do. And because there's no limit to the number of heroes you can have in your realms, and that you can still win the game with heroes out on the board as long as you accomplish your goal, so it didn't matter that I just kept chucking them all in the jail. I just kept sliding them all over there. I'm like, go. The only time I defeated them is when it was preventing me from acquiring power tokens.
And the length of play really is going to vary on the number of players. It really extends it out. If you have 2 players, it might be about 40 minutes. It estimates like 6 players to be 120 minutes. It obviously varies if you're not watching somebody, they play into their victory real quick. But in general, that's about the range it'll take 40 to 120 minutes based on the number of players.
Right, and the more players, the more everyone's out to get each other. So I think there's definitely a lot more roadblocks involved in a nitty-gritty competitive 6-player game versus a head-to-head where, yeah, there may be a lot of fate cards, but your turns are coming around a lot quicker. So, TJ, who's your favorite character to play in Villainous?
Captain Hook.
Why do you like to play Captain Hook?
Well, he has easy objectives, but you have to specifically find the map easily.
Yeah, and have you figured out a strategy to do that since you've played Captain Hook so many times?
Yes, you have to as soon as you find the map, try and get as many coins as you can to do it. Because you can gain 2 coins at the location, and you can also fate.
What else do you like about the game?
I like how there are different objectives for each character. Like how Prince John is just collect 20 power.
Right. Are there any other characters you like playing?
Jafar.
And what do you like about Jafar?
He has an easy job. He just has to have the genie under his control, which is a specific card.
Do you have any tips for people who are playing Villainous for the first time?
You should just start with an easy one, like Prince John or Jafar.
So start with a character with a simpler objective.
Yes. Prince John's as simple as they go.
So when you're playing Villainous, what's your favorite way to stop other players from getting their goals?
Fate people!
And what does that mean to fate people?
So you draw the top 2 cards of their deck, and you either play a hero, or an effect, or an item that helps a hero. Like if you played a hero, it would go to any location. But if it was like Lady Cluck, she would not go to the jail.
Right, because her card says that.
Or if it's like Peter Pan, even if the area is locked, you have to play him to Hangman's Tree.
So, what do you think when you're playing Captain Hook or Jafar? Who do you think is the hardest villain to play against, as your opponent?
Whenever you play Ursula, it's hard to beat.
Yeah,
when
it's
you
hard.
played Prince John, I was like, boom, 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 boom.
It was a lot easier to beat me when I was playing Prince John.
Yeah.
You have a harder time figuring out how to stop Ursula.
Yeah, because hers is easy. You just have to defeat King Triton and have the crown and the stippy staff.
The trident?
That's what I said, the stippy staff.
Okay. Do you like being a villain?
Yes, except I like the movies better.
Thanks for being on the podcast today, TJ.
You're welcome.
Couple of special notes. The game is by Prospero Hall and was released by Ravensburger. As we said earlier, there are several add-ons that have come out since that feature other Disney villains. They've also expanded to Marvel and the Star Wars universe as well. And later this year, there's a Disney 100 edition coming out that's called Introduction to Evil, which instead of featuring 6 characters like the original version of Villainous, it will only feature 4. And it's supposed to have a simplified rules set to teach players how to play a little quicker.
Okay, so it's that time. Time for our final evil thoughts.
Well, for me, I mean, we're talking about pairing classic Disney villains plus trying to mess with your friends, being able to win. Yep, sign me up. My competitive streak is ready to go.
I enjoy getting to play as the villain, and that which villain you play changes that style. It's not one mechanic with 6 different themes for the villains layered on top. They're each different. Well, I'm your host, John Wiki, and you can find me on Twitter as John_Wiki. That's Wickee.
And you can find me on social media at Stevies_games.
20-Minute Tabletop is a Morecore Studios production. Theme song by Arthur Rowan, Morecore art by Ceda Duncan. Do you want more tabletop gaming fun? Subscribe to 20-Minute Tabletop on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. Find out more on our website, 20mintabletop.com. That's the numbers 20mintabletop.com. Or connect with us on Twitter and Instagram at 20mintabletop. That's at 20mintabletop. Thank you, and
Roll with fortune. Wah, 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 wah.
Listen to my voice in the tube.
Wah, wah, wah.